Hi guys, so this is Ian Tronto again talking about project-based learning today. We're going to be going off of the book that we have in our class, Reinventing Project-Based Learning, Your Field Guide to Real-World Projects in the Digital Age by Susie Boss and Jane Cross. And today we'll be talking about chapters 3, 4, and 5. So before we get started, I just wanted to do a quick rundown on what is PBL, or project-based learning. So project-based learning is an experimental way for students to learn through experiences and relations with one another to gain knowledge on content. So this is a creative way for our students to express what they've learned, what they've gained, and it should be pretty different between each student on what they're getting from what they're doing in this sense. It shouldn't be the typical one way is the right way. There should be multiple different ways to come up with different solutions, different answers, whatever you may be studying in the classroom for your students to find on their own. So let's get into it. For chapter 3, imagining the possibilities. I had a little typo up there. It says imaging. Real quick, I'm going to do a debrief on it. So the first section, the very first beginning of the chapter, it explains kind of how we can imagine doing projects, and they talk about how you prepare to go on a trip. So you kind of imagine those things, imagine in your head what it looks like, what it's going to be, and that's what you want your students to be doing as well with their projects. You want them to be creative and have these creative juices flowing so they can express themselves in their own certain way. The point of projects goes into a little bit more of the big ideas of what a project is, and that's really why we're doing it. Okay, the big idea is we have a certain idea in mind when we're creating these projects, and it's our students' objective to give us those answers in their own interpretations. So even though projects allow for creativity and differences between the students, they should still all have these common things that we're looking for within the project, regardless of what the class is or the content is. So next we have focus on different technologies. And this is pretty much, we want our students to use different technologies, but at the end of the day, we really want these projects and these students to relate to the real world. So we're using these different technologies and these different projects so these students can create experiences that they've had within themselves already, or they can learn these experiences as they go to relate to the real world. Why are we doing this? What is the point of this, etc. So they're coming up with those answers on their own. The next section, planning for rigor and digital age skills. The biggest thing in this, and you see in parentheses, is the Bloom's taxonomy, which is remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. So remember, understand, and apply we can get from just standard testing, quizzing, things like that, where what we're focusing on in projects is that those last three: analyze, evaluate, and create. So this is what project creation allows us to do in the classroom. It allows our students to analyze, evaluate, and create on their own. It's kind of like the example they used in the book was doing a traditional biography assignment on a historical figure versus a reconsidered biography assignment, which is where they got to create a Hall of Fame for three different historic figures and create their own rubric for what made them Hall of Fame, gave them Hall of Fame status. And they got to come up with why this person was so special in their own sense, in their own way. They got to come up with that. Now they're still learning the content, and they're probably even learning more because they're looking into those other two figures. Whereas the work is a little bit more creative and hands-on, and to be honest, just more fun for the students to do. The next section was digital age literacies, a synthesis, which talks about digital age skills and literacy. There's a quote in there that I kind of liked. It said, literacy boils down to learning to be independent, aware, and productive citizens. So the main thing we want our students to get from this standpoint is we want them to find info and put it out with their own interpretation. We want them to have the info we're looking for, but we want them to be able to express it in their way. The next section about learning dispositions, and this is a really interesting section. It talks about habits of mind. So habits of mind is things that we can't teach the students, but it's traits that they have inside them. It's really encouraged traits, but can't teach directly. So, for example, habits in mind come with hard work or focus in the classroom, um, things like that. We can't really teach them how to do that, but we can kind of guide them with that stuff. And that's what project-based learning kind of allows us to do. The next section keeps students in mind. Um, Again, we want to make sure that all this is passion-based learning. We want to keep the students in mind, keep them engaged, keep them interested. And again, the big word on passion-based learning is passion. We want to help these students connect with social and emotional aspects in their lives, because that's also going to help them um, maintain that information a little bit easier. It's going to help them relate to it a little bit more, and it's going to allow them to really express themselves and give us the ideas. So, A, we're getting what we want, and B, the students are having getting more out of what we want as well. The last section in that chapter was essential learning with digital tools and the web. So, this went through 6 different things. One was research. Students need to be researching things. 2, make ideas visible and express them creatively. 3, we want to look for collaboration. So can the students work together or work with us? Again, this gives them more than just content skills. This gives them those, going back to those habits of mind skills. Can they work together? 4 is project management. Can they use tools that help students? They can use Google Drive, Dropbox, just learning how to manage their project. 5 is reflection and iteration. So we want to encourage reflection and cycles of improvement for our students. And 6, supported study or enrichment using open educational resources. I'm sorry. So this is example they had on there, like Curriki or Khan Academy, where the students are using these digital tools or digital websites to kind of help them gain more knowledge on the content. So just the rundown, again, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it's going into why project-based learning is important, why it is a great tool to use in your classroom. Again, the big things it talked about, like it's stated in the rundown earlier, was pretty much just all the learning dispositions that the students get, the big ideas, the expression, the creativity that they're allowed to express themselves with. Um, definitely a really good idea to run in the classroom, because it allows students to kind of be themselves and allows them that freedom to express themselves while still staying in that area of giving us the answers that we are looking for as well as educators. So chapter 4 is strategies for discovery, and again, this is just a quick debrief on the chapter, but the first part is focus on selecting and designing projects. Next would be reviewing the projects, and then next would be overcoming pitfalls, and it goes into different kinds of pitfalls, such as potential pitfalls being too long of an activity and short on learning, technology layered over traditional practice, or trivial thematic units, too many steps. So students are getting just too many steps, feeling almost like what they said in the book was like reading a recipe. We don't want students to feel that way. Not enough focus on formative assessment, or assessment that doesn't feel authentic. So again, these are some pitfalls that we can reach, and these are things that we want to avoid when creating our projects. The next was designing touristic projects, getting started. We want to be flexible with our project creating. They had a good example in there about a boat project. So pretty much the project they had in mind wasn't really working out. And then students started kind of creating their boats, and they went a different way. Instead of doing the project about the ocean, they started doing a project and creating their own boat in their classroom. The best projects share important features. So again, the features that we want in our projects, loosely designed with possibility of different learning outcomes. Generative, causing students to construct meaning within their project. Center on a driving question. So what's our project about? And then they get to be creative beyond that. We want it to be a realistic idea for them. We want them to tap into rich data and primary sources to find their content. And then we want structured for students to learn with and from each other. So going back into that collaboration, we want the students to be able to work together and learn from each other. So where do project ideas come from? It says it says pretty much we don't want to reinvent the wheel. Again, we want to tweak things and change things up a bit, but use a tried and true project. We can use news stories, for example. Those are always good ones to use as well, talked about. Um, it also talked about using even student questions or interests to start the project, because this is something that's already in their minds, in their heads, things they want to talk about. So run with that and go with that and create or tweak projects to fit that overall mindset. One successful project will lead to another usually as well. It communicates, and again, it also reiterates to use a lot of technology, because in today's age, students love using technology. The last two parts of that section were just designing our own project and then sketching a project. So that was a little practice that we had to do on our own. So again, just a rundown of chapter 4, going into what to look for in these projects. Look for the pitfalls. We don't want these things to be long activities, to have too many steps, etc. And we want to make sure that these have those specific important features so the students are getting the most out of it. So we want to keep them loosely designed with possibility of being different and having different outcomes. We want them to be able to collaborate on the projects and learn from each other. And we want them to center on a driven question that they can all kind of relate to, yet they can all come up with their own personality on that question with their answers. So chapter 5 was all about assessment on the projects. How are we going to grade it? How are we going to relate it to our standards and whatnot? So authentic assessment in project-based learning was the first thing it talked about. And again, just a quote I found in that section, but it talked about, when the cook tastes the soup, that's formative, but when the guest takes the soup, that's summative. I thought that was kind of a really good analogy on assessment and kind of what we need to be looking for when we're assessing our students. Kind of what the next part in that section is, what do we want them to learn? And we also want to take advantage of learning opportunities when we are doing these projects to assess them on. So next was assessment and learning. There was two things it talked about in here. It talked about summative learning measurement, and it talked about how to improve the project. So we want to look at, are the students hitting what we want them to learn? Are they expressing what we want them to find within their creation of their project? And then we want to find ways to improve our project for the future, or if we're ever going to reuse it and things like that. The next section was planning for summative assessment. The big thing I found here was we want to look at the objectives, going into the evidence, going into the activities, and going back into the objectives. So in the book, it has a cool little picture I actually couldn't find, unfortunately. I'm sure it's out there, but I couldn't find one currently. It's just a little circle map on the 3. So we want to look at the objective, and are they finding the objective with correct evidence? And we talked about, we want them using raw data and direct sources to find their stuff. So are they using that? And then, is that relating to the activity we're doing? Is it relating to the task at hand? Are they doing things properly? And is the activity targeting that objective we want them to find? So next, school-wide project specific rubrics. Again, we want to look into our school rubrics and see if we can kind of relate our rubric with that. So then also students, when they're going to different classes, they're not getting confused, and they can be familiar with how the scoring tool is being used. The next thing was customizing school-wide rubrics. So can we use those same rubrics, but can we kind of put our own twist on it, especially from a project-based? Project-based, like we talked about in the last chapters, is a little bit more open. We don't want to give them too many guidelines or structure, because we want them to be creative and find their own ideas and their own answers and things. And then planning for formative assessment, we want to give them timelines. We want to give them goals and timelines on where to hit certain things with the project and where they need to be. So a few assessment options it talked about was interest inventory, self-evaluations, discussions, reflection polls, brainstorming, concept maps, quizzes, portfolios, and a lot more. It also went into more detail on brainstorming and checklists and coffee talks, which are small group sessions, concept maps, exit slips.